So I just tried Square Enix's AI tech demo thing, Portopia Serial Murder Case, and I had a few thoughts on it, so I thought I'd share them. So for those of you who are thankfully ignorant, this is a tech demo displaying what Square Enix has been working on with their AI technology, and apparently it focuses on NLP, which is natural language processing, the idea that it's more or less allows the AI bot thing to process large amounts of text and make sense out of it. Then you got the natural language understanding, which from what I understand is the AI's ability to understand what the person's saying, like it can understand different dialects and things like that. And then you got speech to text, which I didn't see any of that, but sure, okay. And finally, you've got natural language generation, where the AI responds and talks to you like a chatbot sort of thing. Now, I don't know if this tech demo is all smoke and mirrors and none of this shit's been implemented at all, or it's been implemented so poorly that it might as well not have been implemented. Because as far as technology goes, this thing is like on par with the tell me about function in Fallout. Like the original Fallout, where you could ask random NPCs questions and like 99% of words they just say, I don't know. That's literally what this is. There's not really any depth to what you're doing. So basically they've put it in a detective game where you have to go from place to place, and you have this AI programmed assistant who looks like a Dachi from Persona 4, who more or less does whatever you ask him in theory, and you can't do anything for yourself. I'm assuming you're a quadruple amputee or something like that who can't do anything for himself and has to ask his idiot assistant to do everything for him. So you ask Adachi here to pick up objects, talk to people, and whatever else. This element of the game actually cripples it horrendously. For a start, this idiot doesn't understand half of what you're saying. It's like he speaks a different language to you, and you have to find a way to explain it so that he will do it. It's like you speak English and he speaks French. So you're like, open that container. I don't know what any of that means. That thing there, open it. I don't know what that means. Lift the lid. Don't know what that means. And it's just an endless test of patience, just trying to get this guy to understand the most basic of instructions, regardless of how you phrase them. He also has to ask questions in the interview room on your behalf, which is something I didn't quite understand. So I'm trying to ask this person questions and he's answering them all for some reason. I don't know why the hell he needs to even be part of the interview process, but I don't know why I need a go-to guy between myself and the person I've just arrested. Well, or questioning or whatever. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. Not to mention either that really, if you want to put AI technology that's like a chatbot in something like this, the interview process would have actually been the perfect place to do it. You could have actually had multiple AIs programmed to have different personalities and different approaches to things, and the player has to more or less circumvent them, and it'd be like talking to a real person. That would have been interesting and cool. Hell, you could have dropped the rest of the game and just had that as the main focus of the game, kind of like her story, but it's AI generated. But no, that's not how any of this works. Their responses are really limited, and what they actually understand is very limited as well. So you're basically just looking for keywords to move things along. At one point, we found that one of the suspects had more or less hung himself in a forest, and we had to, do some stuff before Logan Paul came along and videotaped it and contaminate the crime scene. So I asked him to pick up the object that's on the floor next to him, and believe it or not, after like 5 minutes of me constantly saying pick that thing up, he doesn't understand. So eventually I'm like, okay, we'll take the body down then. That's not an option. Apparently we're not supposed to do that, which Yeah, you're just supposed to leave this body hanging there for days. Sure, okay. You also can't inform his daughter that he hung himself in the forest. So, yeah, she can get stuffed, I guess. Despite the fact that I knew this guy hadn't done it, I decided to just place the blame of the murder on him and just close the case and just say, yeah, it was him, just to move the plot along some. I don't know if we're meant to do that. It's not very clear, and that's another thing that really is frustrating about this whole thing. There's no clear direction of what you're supposed to do, you just do things and hope for the best. Honestly, this is supposed to be innovative, but it reminds me more of anything of those old text adventures where you had to say, go north, do this, do that, pick up this, look at that. You know when you just had a blank screen and just text and you had to work out the adventure because the game more or less had no graphics? This is basically like that, except you have graphics, and that makes it even more irritating because you can see the solution but can't do it. Another thing as well, the characters don't really respond to anything that you say meaningfully. And I keep thinking back to Facade. I don't know how many people remember that or played that, but that was a kind of interesting look into this kind of gameplay, where basically the player's words and actions more or less influenced how other characters responded in a number of ways. Now, Facade wasn't perfect, and there was a lot of illusion in there. The story would continue no matter what you said or did, and a lot of the time characters just picked up on keywords. So if you said certain words, they'd automatically assume you were talking about sex. Because you said a keyword that they associate with sex, and they just assume from that point onward, yes, you're now talking about sex. It's a bit odd, but I did like that game's approach to this kind of thing. They had two characters with different personalities, and their characteristics and such show depending on what the player does and says to them. There are a number of nice little details about that game which I do enjoy, like the fact that you can walk up to Trip as a man and kiss him as soon as he opens the door, and he responds in a way that's kind of uncomfortable. Like he's like, oh yeah, we went to Europe recently and we've seen that style of greeting, but the men didn't do it to each other. It's kind of weird. He was a bit more receptive if a woman did it, so it made things a bit more interesting that there were these kind of layers and things you could discover with multiple playthroughs and just stumble upon by just playing the game. I also liked as well in that game that being inappropriate actually got a real response from the characters, some of which would result in you actually being manhandled by Trip and thrown out of the house. Whereas in this game, you can say literally anything and nobody seems to bat an eyelid. Facade, whilst it obviously has its flaws and obviously has its elements of, you know, it's an illusion and that there's a lot less choice than you think there is, you still felt like what you say and do influences the playthrough. There are certain things you can bring to the table through multiple playthroughs, for example, where you can say certain words that trigger different lines of conversation. You could also build a relationship with Trip or Grace depending on how you were against them. You could just agree with one of them or agree and disagree with them as you saw fit, and there was even lines where you could actually like romance them on some level, where you could flirt with them or offer them comfort in a way that suggested that you were interested in them. And sometimes if you played your cards right, one of the characters would actually show an interest in you as well. In this game, no, there's nothing like that. The characters are not characters, they're just things you shout at hoping that they'll do something. There's not really any relationship aspect to this. This guy isn't like Kim from Disco Elysium, where things that you say and do actually affect what's going on with him and your relationship and his opinion of you. I literally told this guy to go hang himself next to the guy who'd hung himself in the forest, and he didn't seem to think anything of that. Like, okay. Honestly, I think this as a game, well, it's not really a game, it's a tech demo, and I'm trying not to be too harsh on it as a game. But given that the focus is the AI characters and everything, the AI programming of these characters, no matter what way you look at it, is an absolute failure. There's absolutely nothing about this game that's innovative or clever or interesting. It's just an exercise in frustration. If there's AI in this, which honestly I wouldn't be surprised if they later came out and just said, yeah, we didn't even put the AI in, we just wanted to see if people noticed, I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, because the way that these things respond to you, it is just like a goddamn tell me about function in an old RPG. There's no intelligence to these artificial beings. And honestly, I don't really see any opportunity for any of this stuff in this environment to be shown. I find it to be a bit lacking in any of this stuff that's on the page, because quite frankly, it didn't matter what I said or did, it just seemed to always respond the same way. Like, overall, I'd say AI in video games would be cool if you had more intense and intelligent NPCs. I don't necessarily think AI should be... A lot of people have suggested in the gaming industry that AI should write NPC dialogue and that AI should take over as many aspects as possible. I'm not really for that because it just results in lazy content. But I wouldn't mind more complex NPCs for things like interviews in a detective game. But unfortunately, there's nothing like that on offer here. There's nothing of interest in this. Anyone even interested in AI research, I welcome you to point out to me what the hell this game does that no other game has done before it. Honestly, Facade is a much more impressive display of AI potential. And even that isn't like the Sophia in a video game that this thing is offering, allegedly. So yeah, overall, this is an exercise in frustration. You might have some fun just saying inappropriate things to the characters, but there's literally nothing that they do that actually matters throughout this whole thing. And there's nothing that you do besides following a very basic script that matters either. Thank Christ Final Fantasy XIV is keeping this company afloat, because if it wasn't, well, I think they would have died a few years ago.
Professor Curious is a fucking spurg.